The stars look different from inside the Starbound's observation deck, Dr. Jake. Morrison pressed his hand against the cool metal wall and watched the swirling colors of hyperspace fade into normal space. 3 months of travel had brought them to the edge of a system that nobody had ever seen before. "We have arrived at the destination coordinates," announced the ship's computer in its flat, emotionless voice. Jake turned away from the window and walked toward the bridge where his alien colleagues were already gathering around the main display screen. Kethver stood near the central console, his tall blue form moving with the fluid grace that all Zephyrians possessed. His people had been exploring space for over 2,000 years, and they still found humans fascinating in the strangest ways. The diplomat's large black eyes focused on the data streaming across the screen as he adjusted the translation. Device clipped to his collar. "The planet shows signs of primitive civilization," Kethver said, his voice carrying the musical quality that made all Zephyrian speech sound like singing. "But the energy signatures are very weak. These beings have barely discovered electricity." Chittick made a clicking sound that Jake had learned meant disagreement. The insect-like scientist stood only 4 feet tall, but her compound eyes could process information faster than any computer the humans had built. Her 6 arms moved constantly, as she worked multiple control panels at once, gathering data from every sensor the ship possessed. "Not barely discovered," Chittick corrected, her voice sharp and precise. "They have achieved basic spaceflight. The orbital debris suggests they have launched several primitive rockets, but their technology is at least 500 years behind standard Federation levels." Resonance 7 hummed softly in the corner, the crystal formations that made up the being's body glowing with soft light patterns. The crystalline entity communicated through harmonic frequencies that the ship's computers translated into words, though Jake suspected much of the meaning got lost in translation. "The life signs are curious," Resonance 7's translated voice. "Sod, these beings appear to be carbon-based mammals with very limited physical capabilities. No natural armor, no energy manipulation abilities, no enhanced strength or speed. How did they achieve space travel?" Jake stepped forward and looked at the data himself. The planet below them looked remarkably similar to Earth, with blue oceans and green continents. The cities were small and scattered, nothing like the massive metropolitan areas that covered most Federation worlds. But there were definitely people down there, and they had definitely built spacecraft. "Sometimes the most interesting discoveries come from the most unexpected places," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. He had learned that his alien colleagues often misunderstood human emotions, interpreting excitement as aggression or curiosity as hostility. Kethver's head tilted in the way that indicated confusion. "But these beings appear to be prey animals. Look at their physical structure. They have no claws, no natural weapons, no protective shells or exoskeletons. Their bite force is pathetic compared to any predator species. How do they survive, let alone build technology?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake had heard variations of it from almost every alien species he had encountered during his 5 years with the Federation. Humans were an anomaly. In galactic society, a species that had achieved interstellar travel despite being what most aliens considered physically inferior. "We adapt," Jake said simply. "We use tools, we work together. We think our way through problems instead of fighting our way through them." Chittick's antennae twitched, which Jake recognized as her version of laughter. Tool use is common among primitive species. Many animals use rocks to crack shells or sticks to extract insects, but tool use alone cannot explain spaceflight. "Perhaps we should observe them more closely," Resonance 7 suggested. "The Federation Council will want detailed reports on any new species, especially one that has achieved space travel through such unusual means." Jake nodded and moved to the navigation. "Controls, I recommend we establish orbit and begin standard first contact protocols. But we should be careful not to interfere with their natural development." "Agreed," Kethver said. "But I must admit I am curious about these creatures. They appear to be the most physically vulnerable species we have encountered that has achieved Interstellar capability. As the Starbound moved into orbit around the planet, Jake watched the surface grow larger on the main screen. He could see cities and roads, forests and mountains, all remarkably similar to Earth, but there was something else on the sensors, something that made his colleague shift nervously. Large life forms detected, Chittick announced, her voice rising with excitement. Multiple signatures moving through the forested regions. Body mass suggests creatures over 12 feet in height. The display shifted to show thermal imaging of the planet's surface. Massive shapes moved through the dense forests, too large to be the planet's intelligent inhabitants. These were clearly predators, and they were huge. Bone density scans indicate natural armor plating, Resonance 7 reported. These creatures are built for combat. Multiple limbs, enhanced musculature, predatory dental structure. They are apex predators. Kethver stepped back from the screen. If such creatures exist on this world, how do the native inhabitants survive? They appear to have no natural defenses against such threats. Jake studied the data carefully. The predators were indeed massive, but they seemed to avoid the areas where the intelligent inhabitants lived. There were clear boundaries between predator territory and civilization, as if some kind of understanding existed between the two groups. Maybe they've learned to coexist, Jake suggested. Or maybe they've found ways to defend themselves that we don't understand yet. Impossible, Chittick said firmly. No species could survive alongside such predators without significant natural advantages or advanced technology. These beings have neither. Then how do you explain it? Jake asked Gok before. Anyone could answer. The ship's sensors detected something new. A small spacecraft was rising from the planet's surface, primitive by Federation standards but clearly functional. It was heading directly toward them. Incoming transmission, the computer announced. The main screen flickered and then showed the interior of the alien spacecraft. 3 beings sat in what appeared to be a cramped cockpit. Their features remarkably similar to humans but with subtle differences. Their skin had a slight green tint, and their eyes were larger than human eyes, but they were unmistakably intelligent. "Greetings, visitors from the stars," the lead being said in a language that the ship's computers quickly translated. "We detected your arrival and wish to welcome you to our world. I am Commander Lisa Hayes of the Terra Nova Defense Force." Jake stepped forward, aware that he was about to become the first human to make contact with this species. "Greetings, Commander Hayes. I am Dr. Jake Morrison, representing the Galactic Federation. We come in peace, seeking to learn about your people and your world." Commander Hayes smiled, an expression that looked almost exactly like a human smile. "We would be honored to meet with you, but I must warn you about our world. It is not as peaceful as it may appear from space. We share our planet with creatures that your people might find challenging." Kethver leaned forward, his translator struggling with the concept of challenge. "You speak of the large predators we have detected. How do your people survive alongside such dangerous creatures?" The smile on Commander Hayes' face grew wider. "We have learned to coexist with them. In fact, some of our people have become quite skilled at dealing with them directly. Perhaps you would like to visit our world and see for yourself." Jake looked at his alien colleagues, all of whom appeared uncertain. The idea of visiting a world filled with massive predators clearly made them uncomfortable. But Jake felt a familiar excitement building in his chest, the same feeling he got whenever he encountered something new and potentially dangerous. "We would be honored to visit your world," Jake said. "When would be convenient for you?" "Tomorrow, if you wish," Commander Hayes replied. "We have prepared a landing site near one of our research stations. It will give you a chance to see how we live and work alongside our planet's other inhabitants." As the transmission ended, Jake turned to face his colleagues. Their expressions ranged from worry to outright fear, but Jake felt nothing but anticipation. Tomorrow, he would finally get to see what made this species so special, and why they had achieved something that most of the galaxy considered impossible. The shuttle touched down in a clearing surrounded by the tallest trees Jake had ever seen. Each trunk was easily 50 feet wide, and their bark had a strange metallic sheen that caught the light like polished steel. The canopy above them was so thick that only scattered beams of sunlight reached the forest floor, creating an environment that felt more like a vast cathedral than a natural wilderness. Jake stepped out of the shuttle first, followed by his 3 alien companions. The air was thick and humid, carrying scents of exotic flowers and something else that made his nose tingle. There was an electric charge in the atmosphere that made his skin feel sensitive, as if a storm was approaching. The atmospheric readings are acceptable, Cheddick announced, checking her portable scanner. But there are unusual energy signatures in the air. The electromagnetic field is much stronger than normal. Kethver extended his natural energy shields, a blue glow surrounding his tall frame. I can feel the electrical charge. It makes my defensive systems activate automatically. Resonance 7's crystalline body began to glow more brightly, responding to the energy in the air. The harmonic frequencies are complex here. This planet has a very active magnetic field. Jake breathed deeply, enjoying the strange taste of the air. It reminded him of the moments before lightning strikes, when the world feels alive with possibility. It's beautiful, he said, looking around at the alien forest. Commander Hayes and 2 other Terra Nova inhabitants were waiting for them near the tree line. Up close, Jake could see that they were indeed very similar to humans, though their skin had that slight green tint and their eyes were noticeably larger. They moved with easy confidence, seemingly unconcerned about the dangerous predators that supposedly lived in these forests. "Welcome to our world," Commander Hayes said, approaching the group with a warm smile. "This is Dr. Carol West, our chief biologist, and Lieutenant Ben Murphy, our security specialist." Dr. West stepped forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. "We are very excited to meet representatives of the Galactic Federation. Your species appear to be remarkably similar to our own." "Indeed," Kethver said, his translator converting his musical voice into words. "Though we are curious about how you survive in such a dangerous environment. Our sensors detected numerous large predators in these forests." Lieutenant Murphy chuckled, a sound that was almost identical to human laughter. "The stalkers are active in this area, but they usually avoid groups of people. They prefer to hunt alone." "Stalkers?" Jake asked. "That's what we call the apex predators," Dr. West explained. "They're the dominant species in these forests. 15 feet tall, 6 limbs, natural armor plating, and intelligence that rivals our own. They've been the masters of this world for millions of years." Chiddick's antennae twitched nervously. "And you simply coexist with them?" "We've learned to understand them," Commander Hayes replied. "They're not mindless killers. They're intelligent hunters with complex social structures. If you respect them and don't threaten them, they generally leave you alone." As if summoned by their conversation, a sound echoed through the forest that made all 3 aliens freeze in place. It was a low, rumbling call that seemed to come from all directions at once, resonating through the ground and up through their feet. "What was that?" Kethver asked, his energy shields brightening. "That's a stalker," Lieutenant Murphy said calmly. "Sounds like a big one, too. They're territorial, so it's probably just letting us know that we're in its hunting ground." Jake felt his heart rate increase, but not from fear. It was the same feeling he got when he was about to discover something new and important. "How big do they get?" "The largest one we've recorded was about 18 feet tall," Dr. West said. "But most of them are between 12 and 15 feet. They hunt in a territory that can cover several square miles." Another call echoed through the forest, closer this time. The sound made the metallic bark of the trees vibrate, creating a harmonious ringing that filled the air with music. Jake noticed that his alien companions had all activated their defensive systems, while the Terra Nova inhabitants remained completely relaxed. "Perhaps we should return to the shuttle," Resonance 7 suggested, the crystal formations that made up its body pulsing with nervous energy. "Nonsense," Commander Hayes said with a wave of her hand. "The stalkers are fascinating creatures. If you're going to study our world, you should meet one of its most important inhabitants." The sound of heavy footsteps began to echo through the forest, accompanied by the crack of branches being pushed aside. Whatever was approaching was massive, and it was moving with deliberate slowness as if it had all the time in the world. Jake found himself stepping forward, drawn by curiosity and excitement. Behind him, he could hear his alien colleagues whispering among themselves in their native languages, their translators struggling to convert expressions of fear and concern. "Dr. Morrison," Keffer called out, "perhaps you should remain closer." To the shuttle. But Jake was already moving toward the tree line, his eyes scanning the shadows between the massive trunks. The Terra Nova inhabitants followed him casually. Showing no signs of concern about the approaching predator, the footsteps grew louder, and then the undergrowth parted like a curtain. The creature that emerged was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Even in his years of studying alien life forms across the galaxy, the stalker stood at least 15 feet tall, its body covered in what appeared to be natural armor plating that shifted from deep green to metallic gray as it moved. It had 6 limbs, each ending in claws that looked capable of tearing through solid steel. Its head was elongated and skull-like, with multiple sets of eyes arranged along its cranium, giving it perfect awareness of its surroundings. The creature's mouth was filled with rows of teeth designed for crushing bone, and its breathing created a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve. When it moved, its armor plates shifted and clicked together, creating a rhythm that was almost musical. "Magnificent," Dr. West whispered, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "This is a mature male, probably around 40 years old. Look at the scarring on his armor plating. He's been the dominant predator in this territory for a long time." The stalker's multiple eyes focused on the group of visitors, studying them with obvious intelligence. It tilted its massive head, as if trying to understand what these strange creatures were doing in its territory. Jake could hear his alien companions behind him, their defensive systems charging up and their weapons preparing to fire. But he also noticed something else. The stalker's posture was curious, not aggressive. It was studying them the same way they were studying it. "It's beautiful," Jake said quietly, taking another step forward. The stalker's head turned toward him, all of its eyes focusing on the human. For a moment, the two apex predators of their respective worlds studied each other in silence. "Dr. Morrison," Chittick called out, her voice sharp with alarm. "That creature could kill you with a single swipe of its claws. Please step back." But Jake was fascinated by the intelligence he could see in the stalker's eyes. This was not a mindless beast. This was a thinking, reasoning predator that had ruled this world for millions of years. It was trying to understand him just as much as he was trying to understand it. The stalker took a step forward, its massive claws leaving deep gouges in the earth. The sound of its movement was like a landslide, and Jake could feel the vibrations through the ground. Behind him, he could hear the whir of charging weapons and the hum of energy shields reaching full power. "Nobody move," Lieutenant Murphy said quietly. "It's just investigating. If we don't threaten it, it will probably lose interest and move on." But as Jake watched the creature's behavior, he began to notice something troubling. The stalker's posture was shifting subtly, its head lowering and its claws extending. The multiple eyes were no longer curious. They were calculating. "I don't think it's going to lose interest," Jake said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through his system. The stalker's armor plates began to shift, creating a rattling sound that filled the air. It was a warning. Jake realized the same kind of warning that a rattlesnake gives before it strikes. "It's sizing us up," Dr. West said, her voice losing its earlier confidence. "It's trying to decide if we're prey or predators." The creature's massive head swayed from side to side, its eyes studying each member of the group. When its gaze fell on the 3 aliens with their glowing shields and charging weapons, it paused. But when it looked at the humans, standing calmly, without any visible defenses, Jake saw something change in its expression. "It thinks we're prey," Jake said quietly, understanding flooding through him. "It sees the aliens as threats because of their weapons and defenses. But it sees us as food, because we appear to be helpless." The stalker's decision was made in an instant. Its massive form coiled like a spring, and Jake could see the muscles beneath its armor preparing to launch the creature forward with devastating speed and power. "Everyone down!" Lieutenant Murphy shouted, but Jake knew there wasn't time. The apex predator of an alien world was about to discover that. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look dangerous at all. The stalker exploded forward with a speed that defied its massive size. 15 feet of muscle and armor launched through the air like a missile, its 6 claws extended and its massive jaws open wide enough to swallow a person whole. The sound of its charge was like thunder, and the ground shook beneath its powerful stride. Kethver's energy shields flared to maximum brightness, but the charging time for his defensive weapons was too slow. Chiddick's acid sprays were still building pressure, and her 6 arms moved frantically across her equipment controls, trying to bring her weapons online fast enough to matter. Resonance 7's harmonic disruptors began to charge, but the crystalline being's defensive systems needed several seconds to reach full power. The Terra Nova inhabitants dove for cover behind the massive trees, their faces showing the same terror that any prey animal displays when confronted by a predator. Commander Hayes shouted something that was lost in the thunderous sound of the stalker's approach, and Lieutenant Murphy reached for his weapon but knew he would never draw it in time. In the space of a heartbeat, the alien apex predator covered the distance between the tree line and the group of visitors. Its multiple eyes locked onto Jake, who stood directly in its path, apparently frozen with fear like any normal prey animal would be, but Jake was not frozen with fear. He was calculating. As the stalker closed the final few feet, Jake dropped low and rolled to his right, moving with a fluid grace that caught everyone by surprise. The massive creature's claws whistled through the air where Jake's head had been just a moment before, and its enormous bulk sailed over the spot where he had been standing. The stalker's momentum carried it forward, and Jake sprang up from his roll directly beneath the creature's rear section. His hands found purchase on one of the stalker's powerful hind legs, and he used the creature's own forward motion to swing himself up and onto its back. The stalker hit the ground hard, its claws gouging deep furrows in the earth as it tried to stop its charge. The impact sent vibrations through the ground that could be felt 50 feet away, and the sound was like a small earthquake. Jake rode the landing like a surfer on a wave, his body moving with the creature's motion instead of fighting against it. As the stalker tried to regain its balance, Jake shifted his position, moving to a spot just behind the creature's shoulder where its claws could not reach him. The watching aliens stood frozen in disbelief. Their primitive human colleague had not only survived the charge of an apex predator, but had somehow managed to position himself on the creature's back. It was impossible according to everything they knew about predator-prey relationships. How was he doing that? Chiddick whispered, her compound eyes tracking every movement. The stalker twisted its massive head around, trying to see what had landed on its back. Its multiple eyes rolled in their sockets, searching for the prey that had somehow escaped its killing strike. The creature's confusion was obvious, and its movements became more erratic as it tried to understand what had happened. Jake felt the creature's muscles bunching beneath him as it prepared to roll over, trying to crush whatever was on its back. He anticipated the movement and slipped off the creature's side, landing lightly on his feet just as the stalker threw itself onto its back with a crash that shook the entire clearing. The creature rolled and thrashed, trying to crush its tormentor, but Jake was already moving. He circled the struggling predator, staying just out of reach of its claws while studying its movement patterns. His eyes tracked the way the creature's armor plates shifted when it moved, noting the gaps and joints that appeared and disappeared as the stalker fought to right itself. "He's studying it," Dr. West said in amazement. "He's learning how it moves." The stalker managed to roll back onto its feet, and its multiple eyes immediately locked onto Jake, who stood calmly about 10 feet away. The creature's breathing was heavier now, and there was something new in its expression. The confidence was gone, replaced by uncertainty and the first traces of caution. For millions of years, the stalker species had been the undisputed masters of their world. Nothing escaped their initial charge. Nothing survived their claws and teeth. Nothing stood and faced them without fear. But this strange, soft creature was doing all of those things? The stalker circled Jake slowly, its massive head swaying from side to side. It was reassessing the situation, trying to understand what kind of prey this could be. Jake turned with the creature, keeping his eyes locked on its multiple gazes, never breaking eye contact. "Look at his posture," Commander Hay said quietly. "He's not acting like prey at all. He's acting like a predator." Kethavar's energy shields flickered as his concentration wavered. "But he has no weapons, no armor, no natural defenses. How can he face such a creature?" The stalker made its decision and lunged forward again, but this time its attack was more cautious. Instead of the full-speed charge, it approached with a series of quick strikes, testing Jake's reactions while keeping its body positioned to retreat if necessary. Jake moved like water, flowing around the creature's attacks without ever seeming to hurry. When the stalker's right claw swept toward him, he stepped inside the arc of the attack, too close for the claw to strike effectively. When the creature tried to bite him, he was already moving to its blind spot. The watching aliens began to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Jake was not just avoiding the creature's attacks. He was controlling the encounter, dictating the pace and positioning of the fight. "He's using the creature's size against it," Resonance 7 observed, the crystal formations that made up its body pulsing with amazement. The larger the predator, the more momentum it has, and the harder it is to change direction quickly. The stalker's frustration was growing. It had never encountered prey that moved in such a way, and its hunting instincts were failing it. Every attack was avoided, every lunge was turned aside, and the strange creature it was hunting never seemed to tire or slow down. Jake began to move closer to the stalker during its attacks, staying within the creature's reach for longer periods. The aliens watched in horror, certain that he was making a fatal mistake. But Jake was not making a mistake. He was learning. Each time the stalker attacked, Jake gathered more information about its capabilities and limitations. He learned that it favored its right side, probably due to an old injury. He noticed that its rear legs were slightly shorter than its front legs, affecting its balance when it turned quickly. He observed that its armor plates restricted its movement in certain directions. The stalker launched another attack, sweeping its massive claws in a wide arc that should have been impossible to avoid. But Jake dropped low and rolled beneath the creature's arm, coming up inside its guard. For a moment, he was close enough to touch the creature's armored hide. Instead of striking, Jake placed his hand on the stalker's flank and felt the rhythm of its breathing, the tension in its muscles, the way its armor plates shifted as it moved. He was learning the creature's body language, understanding its physical capabilities in a way that no prey animal ever could. The stalker spun around, trying to catch Jake with its tail, but he was already moving, flowing around the creature's massive form like smoke. The predator's multiple eyes tracked his movement, but its body could not keep up with his speed and agility. For the first time in its long life, the apex predator of an alien world was beginning to understand that it was no longer the hunter. It was becoming the hunted. Jake's calm expression never changed, but his movements became more confident. He was no longer just avoiding the creature's attacks. He was beginning to anticipate them, to predict what the stalker would do before it did it. The watching aliens realized they were witnessing something that would change their understanding of humanity forever. Their soft, vulnerable human colleague was not just surviving an encounter with an apex predator. He was dominating it, and the real fight had not even begun yet. The stalker's confusion was turning into something that its species had never experienced before: fear. For the first time in millions of years of evolution, one of the galaxy's most perfect predators was beginning to understand what it felt like to be prey. Jake continued to circle the massive creature, his movements becoming more confident with each passing second. He had learned the stalker's patterns, understood its limitations, and identified its weaknesses. Now it was time to act on that knowledge. The stalker lunged forward again, but this time Jake did not dodge. Instead, he stepped directly into the creature's attack, catching its massive right arm just above the wrist. The impact should have crushed him, but Jake used the creature's own momentum to redirect the strike, turning the stalker's strength against itself. The massive predator found itself off balance, its arm twisted in a direction it was never meant to go. Jake maintained his grip on the creature's limb, using leverage and precise pressure to control the stalker's movement. The creature tried to pull away, but Jake moved with it, never fighting against its strength but always redirecting it. "Impossible," Kethvar whispered, his energy shields flickering with amazement. "He is controlling a creature 10 times his size." The stalker's other arm swept toward Jake, but he was already moving. He ducked under the sweeping claws and stepped closer to the creature's body, finding the spot where its armor plates met, and left a small gap. Jake pressed his fingers into that gap, applying pressure to a nerve cluster that made the creature's entire left side go numb. The stalker roared in pain and confusion, a sound that echoed through the forest like thunder. It had never felt pain like this before, sharp and precise instead of the dull ache of battle wounds. This was something entirely new and terrifying. Jake released the pressure point and stepped back, watching as the stalker shook its head and tried to understand what had happened. The creature's left arm hung uselessly at its side, not paralyzed but weakened enough that it could no longer attack effectively. "He knows exactly where to strike," Dr. West said in amazement. "He's targeting the creature's nervous system." The stalker tried to compensate for its weakened left side by attacking more aggressively with its right arm and rear legs. But Jake had already anticipated this response. He moved to the creature's left side, staying in its weakened area where its attacks were slow and clumsy. The massive predator spun around, trying to bring its stronger right side to bear, but Jake moved with it, maintaining his position in the creature's blind spot. The stalker's multiple eyes rolled frantically, trying to track its tormentor, but Jake's positioning made it impossible for the creature to see him clearly. Jake reached out again, this time finding a pressure point along the creature's spine. He applied force with his thumb, pressing into the gap between 2 armor plates. The stalker's rear legs buckled and the creature nearly fell as its balance was disrupted. "He's systematically disabling it," Chittick observed, her compound eyes tracking every movement. "He's not trying to kill it. He's trying to control it." The stalker was beginning to panic. Nothing in its evolutionary history had prepared it for this type of encounter. It was used to overwhelming prey with size and strength, but this strange creature was turning those advantages into weaknesses. Jake continued his methodical approach, moving around the creature's body like a technician, working on a complex machine. He found pressure points that made the creature's claws retract involuntarily. He located nerve clusters that disrupted the stalker's coordination. He applied leverage to joints that forced the creature to move in ways that exhausted its energy. The watching aliens began to understand that they were witnessing something far more sophisticated than a simple fight. This was a demonstration of knowledge, technique, and understanding that went far beyond anything they had imagined humans capable of. "How does he know where to strike?" Resonance 7 asked, the crystal formations that made up its body pulsing with confusion. "He's reading the creature's body language," Commander Hayes said quietly. "He's understanding how it moves, how it's built, and how to make it do what he wants it to do." The stalker made one final desperate attack, rearing up on its hind legs and bringing both front claws down in a devastating strike that should have crushed Jake into the ground. But Jake was no longer where the creature expected him to be. He had moved to the stalker's rear, and as the creature's claws struck the ground, Jake grabbed one of its hind legs and applied pressure to a specific point just above the ankle. The stalker's leg collapsed, and the massive creature crashed to the ground with a sound like a falling tree. Jake did not let go. He maintained his grip on the creature's leg, using leverage to keep the stalker pinned while applying pressure to another nerve cluster. The creature's struggles became weaker, not because it was injured, but because Jake was systematically shutting down its ability to fight. The stalker's breathing became labored, not from physical exertion, but from the stress of being completely dominated by a creature it had initially seen as easy prey. Its multiple eyes rolled wildly, trying to understand what was happening to it. Jake moved to the creature's head, staying just out of reach of its snapping jaws. He found pressure points along the creature's neck that made it difficult for the stalker to lift its head. He applied gentle but firm pressure to spots that made the creature's armor plates shift uncomfortably. "He's not hurting it," Lieutenant Murphy said in amazement. "He's just making it tired." The stalker's struggles were becoming weaker with each passing moment. Jake's systematic approach was exhausting the creature without causing any permanent damage. The apex predator was learning what it felt like to be completely helpless. Jake found a final pressure point at the base of the creature's skull, a spot where the armor plates met and left a small gap. He applied gentle pressure with his fingertips, and the stalker's eyes began to close. The creature was not losing consciousness, but it was being forced into a state of calm submission. "Sleep," Jake said quietly, his voice carrying a tone of authority that even the alien predator could understand. The stalker's breathing slowed and its massive body relaxed. The creature was still fully conscious, but it was no longer fighting. It lay on the ground like a giant pet, its multiple eyes looking up at Jake with an expression that could only be described as respect. Jake stood up slowly, brushing dirt from his clothes. He looked down at the massive predator that had been trying to kill him just minutes earlier, and there was no anger or hatred in his expression. There was only calm satisfaction, like a teacher who had just finished a particularly difficult lesson. "How?" Kethver asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How did you do that?" Jake looked at his alien colleagues, all of whom were staring at him with expressions of shock and amazement. "I listened," he said simply. "I watched, I learned, and then I acted." The stalker raised its massive head and looked at Jake with all of its eyes. There was no aggression left in its gaze, only curiosity and something that might have been admiration. The creature had learned something new about the universe, something that challenged everything it thought it knew about predators and prey. Jake reached out slowly and touched the creature's armored hide. The stalker did not flinch or pull away. Instead, it leaned into the touch, accepting the contact from the being that had just taught it a lesson about power and control. "You can go now," Jake said quietly. "You've learned what you needed to learn." The stalker rose slowly to its feet, its movements careful and deliberate. It looked at Jake for a long moment, as if trying to memorize the creature that had changed its understanding of the world. Then, without any sign of aggression or threat, the massive predator turned and walked back into the forest. The clearing fell silent except for the sound of breathing and the distant calls of other creatures in the forest. Jake stood calmly in the center of the clearing, looking completely relaxed despite having just dominated one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. His alien colleagues remained frozen in place, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Their understanding of human capabilities had been completely shattered, and they were struggling to rebuild it from the ground up. The apex predator of an alien world had just learned that there was something even more dangerous than size, strength, and natural weapons. There was intelligence, patience, and the ability to turn an opponent's advantages into weaknesses, and Jake Morrison had just demonstrated that humans possessed all of those qualities in abundance. The silence in the clearing stretched on for nearly a minute before anyone found their voice. Jake stood calmly in the center of the space where moments before a life-and-death struggle had taken place, brushing leaves from his clothes as if he had just finished a pleasant walk in the woods. Kethver was the first to speak, his musical voice shaking with disbelief. "That creature could have killed any of us in seconds." "How did you make it submit to you?" Jake looked at his alien colleague with a patient expression. "I didn't make it do anything. I simply showed it that continuing to fight would be more difficult than stopping. Every creature, no matter how strong, will choose the path of least resistance when given the option." Chittick's 6 arms moved nervously as she processed what she had witnessed. "But you have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced strength. You should have been killed instantly." "Strength isn't always about muscles and claws," Jake replied. "Sometimes it's about understanding. That creature was built for overwhelming prey quickly. When that didn't work, it didn't know what to do next." Dr. West approached Jake with something close to reverence in her eyes. We've been studying the stalkers for decades, and we've never seen anything like what you just did. You turned a killing machine into a gentle giant. He didn't hurt it, Lieutenant Murphy added, still staring at the spot where the massive predator had disappeared into the forest. He just made it understand that fighting was pointless. Resonance 7's crystalline body pulsed with rapid light patterns indicating deep thought. Your species has developed something that we have not encountered before. You have weaponized adaptation itself. Jake smiled at the description. We call it problem solving. When humans encounter a challenge that we can't overcome with strength or speed, we find another way. We observe, we learn, and we adapt our approach until we find a solution. Commander Hayes shook her head in amazement. Our people have been living alongside the stalkers for generations, but we've always done it by avoiding them or hiding from them. You faced one directly and made it respect you. Respect is the key word, Jake said. I didn't try to dominate that creature or prove I was stronger than it. I just demonstrated that I understood it better than it understood me. The group began walking back toward the shuttles, but the conversation continued. The Terra Nova inhabitants peppered Jake with questions about human fighting techniques, while the aliens struggled to understand how such methods could be effective. But surely this was an unusual situation, Kethver said. Against multiple predators, or in different circumstances, such techniques would be insufficient. Actually, Jake replied, the principles scale up quite well. Humans have been persistence hunters for thousands of years. We don't need to be faster than our prey. We just need to be smarter and more patient. As they reached the shuttles, Chedek was frantically taking notes on her portable computer. The implications for galactic defense are staggering. If humans can neutralize apex predators through technique rather than technology, what could they do against hostile alien species? The question hung in the air as they prepared to return to the Starbound. Jake noticed that his alien colleagues were looking at him differently now, with a mixture of respect and uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Back aboard the ship, the news of what had happened spread quickly through the crew. The security footage from their personal recording devices was analyzed and reanalyzed, with experts from multiple Federation species trying to understand what they had witnessed. Kethver immediately sent a message to the Zephyrian High Council, describing the encounter in detail. Within hours, responses began flooding in from across the galaxy. Military strategists wanted to study human combat techniques. Xenobiologists demanded access to human evolutionary data. Diplomatic Corps members began discussing the implications for Federation defense policies. The response has been unprecedented, Kethver reported during their evening briefing. Every major species in the Federation wants to know more about human capabilities. Chiddick displayed her analysis on the main screen. I have identified 17 distinct techniques that Dr. Morrison used during the encounter. Each one demonstrated superior understanding of biomechanics, physics, and predator psychology. But the most impressive aspect, Resonance 7 added, was the speed of adaptation. Dr. Morrison learned the creature's weaknesses in real time and developed counter-strategies within minutes. Jake listened to the discussion with growing amusement. You're making it sound more complicated than it is. I just paid attention to what the creature was telling me through its body language and behavior. That's exactly the point, Dr. West said, joining the conversation via communication link from the planet's surface. What seems simple to you is revolutionary to us. You processed information and adapted your strategy faster than our most advanced computers could analyze the same data. Commander Hayes appeared on the screen beside Dr. West. We've been discussing your demonstration with our planetary council. They want to invite your species to establish a permanent research station here. We believe we could learn much from each other. The Federation Council has made a similar proposal, Kethver announced. They want to offer humanity a strategic partnership rather than standard membership. Your species would be classified as a specialized tactical advisor race. Jake frowned at the suggestion. We're not weapons or tools to be used. We're people who happen to have developed certain survival skills. Of course, Kethver said quickly. But the Federation recognizes that human capabilities could be invaluable in dealing with hostile species or dangerous situations. Your ability to analyze and neutralize threats without causing permanent harm could revolutionize peacekeeping operations. Chittick pulled up additional data on her screen. I have been researching human evolutionary history. Your species developed these abilities because you were forced to compete with physically superior predators on your homeworld. You survived by being smarter, not stronger? Every challenge made you more adaptable, Resonance 7 observed. While other species developed specialized physical capabilities, humans developed specialized mental capabilities. Jake nodded slowly. Our ancestors had to learn to hunt animals that were bigger, faster, and stronger than they were. They couldn't outrun a mammoth or overpower a saber-toothed cat, so they had to outsmart them. And that evolutionary pressure created something unique, Dr. West said from the planet's surface. A species that can analyze any threat and develop effective countermeasures on the fly. The implications were beginning to sink in for everyone involved. Humanity wasn't just another species joining the galactic community. They represented a completely new approach to problem-solving and threat assessment. I want to learn these techniques, Kethver said suddenly. If humans can neutralize apex predators without weapons or technology, what could we accomplish by combining human techniques with alien capabilities? The training would be available to any species that wanted to learn, Jake replied. But remember, these aren't just fighting techniques. They're problem-solving methods that can be applied to any challenge. Commander Hayes smiled from the screen. We've already begun organizing training programs on our world. The Stalkers make excellent training partners, now that we know they can be approached safely. Chittick's antennae twitched with excitement. Imagine the possibilities. Medical applications for pressure point techniques. Engineering solutions based on leverage and redirection principles. Diplomatic strategies that use opponent psychology to find peaceful resolutions. The Federation has been relying on superior technology and overwhelming force for thousands of years, Resonance 7 said thoughtfully. Perhaps it's time we learn to be more elegant in our solutions. Jake looked around at his colleagues, both alien and human, and saw something that made him smile. For the first time since humanity had made contact with galactic civilization, they weren't being treated as junior partners or primitive newcomers. They were being recognized as equals who brought unique and valuable capabilities to the galactic community. There's one more thing you should understand, Jake said as the meeting began to wind down. What you saw today wasn't unusual for a human. Every person on Earth has the potential to do what I did, given the right training and experience. The silence that followed this statement was profound. The aliens were contemplating a galaxy where every human possessed the ability to neutralize threats through intelligence and technique rather than force and technology. Welcome to the Federation, Kethver said finally, his voice filled with genuine respect. We have much to learn from each other. As Jake looked out at the stars through the ship's observation window, he realized that humanity's journey into the galaxy was just beginning. And for the first time, they would be walking that path as recognized masters of their own unique form of survival and adaptation. The apex predators of 1,000 worlds were about to discover what the Stalker had learned that day. Sometimes the most dangerous creature in the galaxy is the one that doesn't look dangerous at all.